As a creative aspect, TV is one of the best things that we do as a species. Along with music and film and books, they bring out the best creative of all of us. They entertain and they bring so much joy to many. They invoke emotion and enable us to feel things that we bury sometimes deep down. That's what this podcast is for. Welcome to A Million Little TV Shows. This is what I call the breakdown while I break down. Each week I will go through a different TV show, a different season of that TV show, and different episodes of that show. And I will break down not only emotions, but I will break down stories from my life, and let you know why these TV shows mean so much to me, and why I believe that they are some of the most important shows out there. This podcast is here to highlight a lot of smaller TV shows, or TV shows that don't really get a platform, because we know of a bunch of TV shows that get a multitude of different podcasts. Ted Lasso, Game of Thrones, The Office, they've all got several podcasts out there analysing all types of different things. But there's not many out there for the little guy, and that's what I'm trying to highlight. So each week I will go through a different show, different seasons, different episodes, and I will go across all different kinds of genres and different countries to bring you what I believe is some of the best TV out there. So I'm glad you're here with me. I'm glad you're here for this journey. And if you've watched the shows before and you wanted to come here and get an analysis on them and have someone go through them and pick out bits that you might have enjoyed, then I'm glad you are here. If, however, you have never watched the show and you just want to come and have someone talk in your ear about different TV shows, I'm glad you are here. But I hope that it inspires some people to go and seek out these TV shows. They deserve to be watched. They were made with love and care, and they are the same as this podcast, made with love and care. I am your host, Mike, and I will take you through every adventure, every horror, every piece of drama, and I hope that you enjoy the show. Hello there, and welcome back to this A Million Little TV Shows podcast. This is now episode 10 of season 13, and after my cock up in episode 8, I have rejigged my schedule and I have managed to get some excellent TV shows for us today. So, what are we diving into? We're going to be hitting the first 4 episodes of the Netflix horror thriller series, Something Very Bad Is Going to Happen. The title practically tells us the ending before they even start, but the real mystery is what the bad thing is, who is it going to happen to, and why the main character feels this overwhelming sense of doom. And by episode 4, what begins as anxiety for a big event evolves into something much darker. And could it be a supernatural event, family secrets, or just a general sense of dread around the fact that you may not have found your own soulmate? But anyway, let's break it down by episode and let's get into this. So, this is Something Very Bad's Going to Happen, Season 1, Episodes 1 to 4. Episode 1, Never Get on One Knee. Okay, so we open the show and we are told that we are 5 days in the future. Rachel, our lead character, is walking down the aisle towards Nikki. Everything looks like a normal wedding, but the way that it's shot immediately tells you something's wrong. Of course, the name of the show is a good indicator as well. Nikki lifts the veil and puts a ring on her finger, and Rachel flashes through some memories of arguments, intimate moments, and disturbing images. Then the show shows us a major horror image. A dog walking through a bloodied hallway while people are screaming. Right away, the series establishes 2 timelines, the wedding day and the days leading up to that day. And we already know that there is a disaster in the future. And then you start to wonder whether the trepidation on Rachel's face is telling a different story. This isn't nerves about a wedding, this is something different, something darker. And then we go back to the present, and we are 5 days from the wedding. And Rachel and Nikki are driving to his family's remote property for the wedding week. And the drive immediately feels wrong. Rachel almost nods off and nearly causes an accident. And it's the first in a string of warnings that something's off. And then we get to the next point of our journey. And this is where the episode starts to feel genuinely strange. Not only has Rachel almost crashed, we've also seen what looks to be a truck following both her and Nikki. And now we find a baby at a rest stop. And these are all classic tropes from horror films. Someone following you on a dark road, potential crashes, and now something strange in a strange location. Rachel and Nikki go over to the car and they find this baby alone. No one around, no explanation, just an abandoned infant. And so they try to figure out what's going on, and they try to search for help. But none of this feels real. It doesn't feel like a natural encounter. It almost feels like a dream in some spaces. Rachel, however, she heads off to go and get help. She leaves Nikki there, and she drives some way down the road. And this is where we see the truck again. It begins to follow her. And once Rachel reaches a bar, she heads in and she asks for help. The person behind the bar says that they'll go and call the cops, but then Rachel sees a man. She thought the barmaid was alone, and now this man appears out of nowhere. He comes closer and closer to Rachel, and she stabs him in the hand with her keys. But he doesn't react. Instead, he asks her one question, and that is, are you sure he's the one? As we know now, that line becomes one of the more central questions throughout the entire series. And so Rachel heads back. She finds Nikki. The parents have turned up and they've taken the baby, but they've also punched Nikki in the process before apologising to him and then going on their way. And even though it ended civilly, it doesn't feel like it's operating towards the normal societal rules. And then they just end up continuing on their journey. They drive past the bar that Rachel was just in, and then they reach Nikki's family's property. But again, we don't get that feeling of safety from here. Immediately something feels off, the house is isolated, and the atmosphere feels kind of oppressive. And now we've gone from a road trip horror into an isolated cabin in the woods type deal. Eventually, the rest of the family start to congregate around this house. It's big enough for people to get lost in, but we meet Nikki's family, and mainly in this case Portia, and she tells Rachel of a local legend, a story about the sorry man. And he was a terrifying figure who supposedly comes up from hell searching for his wife and cuts open women trying to find her. It's presented as a tall tale, like a folklore, but the way that the episode frames it, we're clearly supposed to take it seriously. So now not only have we got a cabin in the woods situation, we've got a potential serial killer or a phantom of some sort. And since all great horror stories generally have a monster, well, in this case, the monster is the sorry man. But again, we don't know whether it's literal or symbolic, or maybe even both. Later that night, however, Rachel encounters Nikki's mother, Victoria. The conversation is short but incredibly unsettling. Victoria cryptically tells Rachel that they won't be seeing much of each other. Again, Rachel's about to marry her son, and yet she doesn't think that they're going to see each other that much afterwards. And so at this point, we're unsure of what this means. We know from the very beginning of the show that something very bad's going to happen. It's the name of the show. But what does this mean from Victoria? Does it mean death? Does it mean separation? Is Nikki going to run away? Is Rachel going to run away from this? Or is it something stranger? Victoria is ushered away by her husband, and then we see that she was just collecting the mail. She's stood around a bunch of letters that are on the floor, but one of them is related to Rachel. Rachel opens it, and it is a returned wedding invite, but written simply on it is the message, "Don't marry him." No explanation, no signature, just a direct warning. And so we've got a lot of information in this one episode. It feels about dread. Again, we know the wedding doesn't end the way that it generally should do. But why shouldn't she marry him? Who was the stranger that she actually met at that rest stop? Who's the sorry man? And if Rachel is feeling this anxious about all of this, why hasn't she left yet? Episode 2, Bride-Shaped Hole. So as we know, Rachel has anxiety. We see that throughout the first episode, and, well, in this episode it gets explored even more, and it turns into more of a paranoia, because we really begin to feel that enclosed situation that she's in. She's stuck in this cabin in the middle of nowhere with people she doesn't know, other than her husband-to-be. And so we see the threat move inside the house, and the entire Cunningham family starts to feel like they're holding something back, maybe even lying to Rachel, or preparing her for something she doesn't understand. So we pick it up in the morning after Rachel gets her "Don't Marry Him" note, and the family gathers for breakfast, and immediately Victoria is weird. We got that sense the previous night, the way that she was, but it continues over into the morning. She gives one of her overly enthusiastic cheers for Nikki. Now, it seems that even though she's got 2 other kids, Nikki seems to be the favourite. He's like some sort of sacred child. And then she begins to talk to Rachel about protecting his soul. Not his heart, not his happiness, but his soul. And this all seems kind of ritualistic. She talks about him like he's part of a religion. Rachel tells Nikki about the warning letter that she received, and he is dismissive immediately. We've seen this throughout, that he does kind of dismiss all of her concerns, but it's as if he knows something that she doesn't. And so at this point, Rachel tries to convince herself that she is overreacting. Everything can be explained: the creepy stranger, the note, the family, the weird stories. Individually, none of them prove anything. But the problem is, all of these things are starting to stack up. And it's one of the smartest things that the show really does. Rachel seems reasonable. She's not spiraling because of one event. She's spiraling because of like 20 small things that are happening around her. And I think if we were in the same boat, we'd do the same. And then, once more, another weird event happens. Rachel's wedding dress goes missing. Just gone, no explanation, no signs of a break-in, no obvious culprit. The dress just vanishes. And this pushes Rachel from mild concern into active investigation. And sometimes in horror stories, clothing can represent identity. So it's not just this missing dress, it's Rachel's future disappearing. But what makes it even stranger is how everyone else reacts. Again, nobody seems alarmed. Nobody panics, apart from Portia. She starts blaming them for not packing a dress, but they did pack it. They know they had it. And Rachel says it herself. The response is weird. So what happens is Nikki ends up trying to drive back to his friends, which is 8 hours away, to find this dress. He knows he has a couple of days' time before he has to be back for the wedding, so he heads out. However, at this point, all the family members seem oddly prepared with alternatives. Victoria offers up her dress. Portia is ready to start cutting and stitching this old dress back together just so it fits Rachel. And it's as if they expected the dress to disappear. And it seems like if a wedding dress of your daughter-in-law disappears 3 days before the ceremony, you tend to freak out a bit. Whereas for the Cunninghams, they just act normal, as if it's just a normal day. And so Rachel feels like she's unable to trust anyone, and she starts looking around the property herself. Again, with Nikki now not being there, she is alone in all of this. She doesn't feel like she can trust the family. The family are being weird, and any time that Nikki rings up, she feels like she is in this alone. And this is where the episode becomes a slow burn mystery. While she is looking around the property, she begins finding pieces of information that don't fit together. Nothing is conclusive, but everything is suspicious now. And it's as if the show understands that finding one huge clue is less scary than finding 10 small clues. And it's just interesting to watch all these small clues just not really meaning anything, but meaning everything at the same time. But while Rachel is digging, things begin to get worse as she starts looking deeper, including at one point when she finds sodium phenobarbital. And that is among Jules's things. Now, Jules is Nikki's older brother. And so why has he got something that is so dangerous? And so all these things are starting to add up now. But as we get further into the episode, more and more things happen, things get worse. So Rachel goes out into the grounds of the estate and ends up finding her wedding dress. However, it's on some sort of folk magic doll, something that you would see in The Wicker Man, for instance. And having knowledge of those types of films makes you feel uneasy again. Suddenly the situation feels less like a family drama and more like a ritual. And the doll raises huge questions. Who put it there? Why? And what does this family believe? We start to see Rachel's paranoia as really starting to be justified. She then hears a noise behind her and she begins to investigate that, and this is the most unsettling thing. She finds Boris, the father of the family, digging a hole in the woods. There's no explanation for it, no context, and of course it's the middle of the night, and she sees him and she runs. because it is a man quietly digging a grave-sized hole in the forest. Rachel doesn't know what she's looking at, and neither do we, which makes it even worse, especially when you take the title of the episode into it, a bride-shaped hole, and he's literally digging a hole. So, what are we meant to think about all of this? What is Rachel meant to think about all of this? So there is an effigy in her wedding dress in the middle of the woods, and now someone is digging a hole. They have mysterious medications, and the family are just being weird. And now she doesn't have her partner there with her. She knows he is on the way back, and Rachel runs. She runs out into the main road, and just at that point, coming up the drive, is Nikki. She gets in the car, tells him that there's some sort of cult or Satanists, and asks him to drive away. He doesn't. Once again, he doesn't listen to his girl. He gets out, and he goes and speaks to his father, and then they're all taken into the house. It turns out that Nikki's mother actually has a very serious illness. She's got an aggressive brain tumour, and on one level this explains some of the bizarre behaviour. However, you do feel like it's a little bit too convenient at this point as well. But it seems like nobody in the family really knew what was going on. Victoria just wanted to have this one last celebration to give something to Nikki, to remember her by, that she was at his wedding and that everything was great. But then she questions what the hell is going on with the wedding dress, why she found this effigy in the woods. It turns out that Jude, Jules' son, well, he got scared of the sorry man story. He heard it when Portia relayed it, and he decided that he wanted to ward it off. He managed to build the effigy, take it out to the woods and hang it. And it was all there just to protect Rachel. So we've got explanations now, but are they decent enough explanations? I'm not sure. But by the end of the episode, you can feel why Rachel is completely isolated. She can't fully trust his family, and she certainly can't trust Nikki. And if she can't trust her own instincts, because every time she raises concerns, someone gives her a plausible explanation. And so the horror isn't that Rachel sees monsters, it's the fact that nobody else sees what she sees. But by the end of the episode, we know that Rachel has had warnings from episode 1, but now she's got evidence. Maybe not enough evidence to leave, but definitely enough evidence to stop unpacking. Episode 3, I Will Light You on Fire. And now we go from a horror on the road to a cabin in the woods situation, and now this starts to feel like a haunting. Because episode 3 is more about an invasion. Something is in the house. Something is watching. And by the end of the episode, Rachel has her first encounter with whatever force has been circling around this family. So we open in the middle of the night, and the camera seems to be moving through the Cunningham estate from the perspective of an unseen observer. There is breathing, there is heavy breathing, and it's the kind that you'd see from the perspective of a hunter or a predator. But at this point, we're unsure what it is. At the same time, however, Boris is downstairs skinning a dead dog for taxidermy work, because apparently this family wasn't creepy enough already. Now, as I've said, when it comes to the Bates Motel, Norman doing taxidermy, we obviously know what happens in Psycho, but it's still a little bit weird, and this feels really weird. His wife's been diagnosed with a terminal illness, and he is downstairs skinning a dead dog. Just feels off. The whole family feels off. But the show refuses to tell us whether we're dealing with a supernatural entity, a person, or something symbolic. But episode 3 wants us to know one thing. Rachel isn't imagining that she's being watched. So, after the previous couple of days, obviously, she's turned up at this house. She's had a weird trip there. She's then got there. She's accused the family of trying to kill her. Rachel is determined to be helpful. She is trying to be a peacemaker. Still trying to convince herself that this is just a dysfunctional family dealing with a tragedy. Because Victoria's illness now hangs over everything. Portia, however, is obsessively managing every wedding detail. And it seems like Jules and his wife Nell cannot be in the same room as each other, whereas Boris is just unemotionally available. Everyone in this family is falling apart in their own way. Rachel keeps acting like she's marrying into a family with just problems, but the audience is starting to suspect she's marrying into a curse. But Nikki finally begins to push back on his parents. He confronts his father about Victoria's condition and wants to know why everyone seems so resigned to her death. He wants to help and he wants to get as much medical help as possible for her. At the same time, he is wrestling with old family wounds because for him, his parents are everything. He sees that his mother and his father are an absolute success. That's what he sees them as. And the fact that they've been able to last so long, he feels is what drives him forward when it comes to finding a relationship. He's built everything on his family being so close. However, Nell and Jules are reaching a breaking point. Their marriage is basically held together by bitterness. And one of the most uncomfortable scenes in the episode is when Jules is in the bath and he tells Nell to actually push him under the water. And when she does it, it's shocking because it feels so real. Nothing supernatural about it, just a raw anger between them. And it shows that human relationships can be more terrifying than any type of monster. However, since Rachel has a background in therapy, she wants to help this family out. And she decides that everyone needs to stop pretending that what is going on with Victoria isn't not happening. And I know that's double negative. So she organises an impromptu family therapy session. And she uses the wedding dressed effigy from the last episode as a stand-in for Victoria. Everyone is encouraged to say the things that they've never been willing to say out loud, but it feels awkward, it's emotional, and it's an ugly scene. But for a brief moment, you can feel that actual healing might happen. But after everyone speaks to the effigy, they then burn it. This scene is really important because it presents as therapy, but visually it looks like a ritual. Now, let's not forget, in the last episode, Rachel thought she was going to be the end of that ritual, but now she's using it to, I suppose, ward off spirits from within this family, whatever they've cursed her with. But it also feels like a line between grief processing and occult ceremony, because those two things become almost impossible to separate here. As for one member I've not really spoken about, and that is Jude. Now, Jude is the son of Jules. He is nothing to do with Nell, but she treats him as if he is her own. But while all the adults are busy unraveling emotionally, Jude starts exploring with a video camera. And this is something that Rachel gave to him. Now, this ends up feeling very much like the Blair Witch Project. And this becomes one of the creepiest sequences of the season. He wanders into the basement, the camera records everything, and eventually captures something terrifying. A man standing motionless against a wall, just watching. No jump scare, no explanation, just a figure that absolutely should not be there. And the camera is important because it gives us objective evidence. Up until now, you can argue that Rachel was paranoid, but now this footage suggests something is genuinely inside the house. But later on that night, Rachel gets up to go and get some water. In a simple and quiet moment, then the episode rips that safety away. An unseen attacker assaults her inside the house. It's sudden, violent, confusing, and unlike the previous warnings, it's physical. And so now we've got to wonder, who was this? Why did this happen? Who's taken Rachel? Why was he hanging around for so long? Why hasn't he revealed himself already? And we still don't have any real answers as to what the fuck is going on. Episode 4, The Witness. And in this episode, this is where the show finally stops asking questions and starts giving us some answers. Obviously not all the answers, but enough to completely change how we see the story. Up until now, we thought Rachel was trapped in a haunted house of some sort, but this episode ends up revealing that she's actually trapped in a family curse story. So, we pick up from the end of the last episode. Rachel is being dragged away in the middle of the night, and Jules' son Jude hears the struggles, and he goes to wake his father. And before anything else can happen, Jude shows his father the camcorder footage he captured in the basement. And this is a huge moment, because when Jules sees the mysterious man on tape, he doesn't react with confusion, he reacts with recognition, and in some ways absolute terror. It's like he's looking at a ghost of his childhood. And so, who could this man be? Well, it turns out he is the mystery man throughout the show so far. Because when Jude asks the question, is that the sorry man? Well, suddenly the local legend stops feeling like folklore, and Jules reveals that when he was a child, he witnessed something horrifying connected to this man in the footage. The myth and reality have started to merge together. And now, after 3 episodes of building up this legend, this episode starts to ask whether the legend is actually just a misunderstood memory. Rachel, however, now meets her kidnapper, and when she wakes up and she discovers she's not being held by some random monster, she's with this mysterious man. And what follows is probably the biggest revelation of the season so far. The man is Rachel's father. He's not dead, not missing, he's alive. Throughout the series, we haven't known where this man is. We knew her mother was dead, but not her father. She always kind of claimed that she was an orphan, or at least had no family. But no, her father is alive, and apparently is connected to everything that's been happening. So once again, the audience assumptions get flipped on their head, because the man in the shadows isn't a stranger, he's family. We then start seeing a videotape playing, and this is footage of a young couple in love, and it seems that they are eloping. Now the video takes place in January 1997, and this is where the episode becomes a tragic origin story, because the footage follows Rachel's parents arriving in the same area where the current story takes place. As I've said, they're young, they're in love, and they are eloping. Everything initially feels hopeful, apart from one small fact, and that is the fact that Rachel's father dislikes Rachel's mother's mother, so Rachel's grandmother, for one small fact, and that is for the fact that she has already told Rachel's mother about this curse. And when you harken back to the video of them going through the town, you get this eerie feeling that you've seen this before, and it's because you have. Several of the things that happen in the first episode happen here. Things that are normal in everyday life, just freaking the main character of this video out, and that is the mother. But because Rachel's mother knows about the curse, her father just won't accept it. And again, where have we seen that before? It's very similar to how Nikki and Rachel have been so far. However, the video continues. The couple gets married in a nearly empty church. Only one witness attends, and during the ceremony, something very familiar happens. The witness quietly asks Rachel's mother, "Are you sure he's the one?" And it's the same exact question we've heard repeated throughout the series. And suddenly the phrase becomes much more important. And the show has been repeating this line ever since episode 1. And now it reveals that the warning isn't just a warning, it's part of the ritual. So after the wedding, Rachel's parents return to the cabin. Then the nightmare begins. Rachel's pregnant mother suddenly starts bleeding from her eyes and her nose. No warning, no explanation, and within moments she's dead. And this is one of the most terrifying scenes of the whole show. It happens so quickly, there's no chase, there's no monster, it's just death arriving like a rule being enforced. And then following the most terrifying scene, we get the most disturbing or the most harrowing scene. Because what follows is Rachel's father desperately trying to save his unborn child, and ultimately performs an emergency extraction himself. And this image is horrifying. They don't shy away from it, they literally try and show you as much as they possibly can. But it reframes everything Jules thought he witnessed years ago, because the event looks like a murder, but was actually an act of desperation. And so we see how Jules actually witnessed this. Jules ran away from his mother on the estate that they are currently on. He ran over to a cabin which is being rented out to this married couple, and when they came back he hid under the bed. And he was under there while Rachel's mother died. And so he witnessed everything. And this is where memory is becoming one of the biggest themes of the show. Because in Jules' eyes, he witnessed a murder, while a man was saying sorry, sorry. And that's where the sorry man came from. And he just misunderstood the tragedy of it all. And so, once we found out all of this information, we go back to the present day. And Rachel's father admits something important. He's the one who sent the warning. He's the person behind the "don't marry him" message. But then we get another string to this mystery, because Rachel tells him she never invited him to the wedding, which means somebody else knew where she was, and somebody else may be pulling the strings here. And it just feels like every time we get an answer to a question, it creates 2 more mysteries. And since we heard about it in the video, we know that Rachel's mother at least believed in this curse. Her father didn't, but now Rachel has found out that her family is cursed. And this is where the episode becomes more about mythology. Rachel's father begins explaining what happened to her mother wasn't random. It was part of this curse. A curse tied to marriage, a curse tied to soulmates, a curse that had been passed down Rachel's bloodline. And so this then creates an even further mystery. We know at the beginning of episode 1, Rachel is at the altar, but did she marry Nicky or didn't she marry Nicky? If she did, well, what happened? Why is there so much bloodshed? But if she doesn't, what happens? Is that why there is bloodshed? And so Rachel goes to see the one man that she believes can give her answers on this. She goes back down to the bar that she was in episode 1, and she meets the man that had been following them. The man who asked her, is he the man for you? And while she's there, she ends up getting the answers to the questions. He tells her more about the curse, and he tells her that basically, if you marry him and he's not your soulmate, you will die. If you marry him and he is your soulmate, you'll be fine. But this man has been waiting around for 200 years, and he has seen many of her family die. He too has been part of this curse, and he knows what happens if you back out of a marriage. You get cursed for life, and this curse will then pass down to Nicky's bloodline. So whichever way Rachel goes about this, she's pretty much fucked. So, after 4 episodes, let's see where we are. I mean, this show's been excellent so far, and I've really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it the first time, and I'm certainly enjoying it the second time. But when we started the series, we were looking forward to, well, what looked like a wedding horror story, nervous bride, and a strange future husband, a creepy family, and a wedding day that we know ended badly. But now, halfway through the season, we know the wedding isn't a mystery. The wedding clock is counting down. Everything that has happened so far has pushed Rachel towards one unavoidable question. What happens if she says I do? And what happens if she doesn't? So, going into the first episode, everything seemed to be disconnected. It felt like every warning that was happening was just there to throw you off. There was an abandoned baby. There was the stranger who was asking, are you sure he's the one? The warning note, and, of course, Victoria's cryptic comments. At the time, they felt like random horror movie weirdness, like they were just throwing anything in there. But now we know that they were all pointing towards the same thing. Someone or something has been trying to stop this wedding from happening from the very beginning. And then we are thrown into the dysfunctionality of the family. The Cunningham family is just hiding secrets. They're carrying around generations of guilt, grief, and buried history. The missing dress, the talisman that it ended up on, the rituals, the stories about the sorry man, and Borch's increasingly prophetic behaviour all suggests that the family is connected to something much older than any of them. But the biggest lesson is that in this family, nobody is telling the truth. Even the people trying to help Rachel seem to be the ones holding her back. As for this sorry man that we heard about, he was always built up as sort of a monster under the bed. We wondered if he was coming for Rachel or coming for anyone in the family. And then when it's flipped on its head, the mysterious figure turns out to be Rachel's father, and the terrifying story may actually be a misunderstanding from years earlier. But that doesn't necessarily make him trustworthy. It just forces us to think everything that we've been told so far. One recurring theme of the show is that witnesses are unreliable, memories and stories are unreliable, and that means the mythology itself is unreliable as well. So what have we got so far going into the next 4 episodes? Well, nothing is certain. Nicky seems to be hiding things, and the Cunningham family definitely know more than they're saying. Rachel's father may be telling the truth, or he may be manipulating her, and the supernatural mythology may not even be accurate. And so there are almost no reliable narrators left, apart from Rachel, who is the one who this is happening to. Once again, the question is, what is going to happen? We know from the very first scene that something catastrophic happens. We know there is blood, we know people are screaming, we know the dogs are walking through the hallway covered in gore, but we don't actually know who dies or who survives, whether the wedding happens at all, or whether the catastrophe is supernatural, human, or both. And so if the first 4 episodes were about mystery, I think the last 4 have got to be about consequences. The show has spent half a season asking questions, now it has to start answering them. Rachel has gone from a nervous bride to a reluctant investigator. She has uncovered family secrets, challenged local legends, discovered her father's connection to the story, and learned that her future may be tied to the events that happened before she was born. But the most important thing we've learned is this. The title isn't a threat anymore. It's a promise. Something very bad is going to happen. The only question left is whether Rachel can figure out what it is before the wedding day arrives. But of course, we'll find out that in 2 weeks' time. But for now, I want to thank you for being here, liking, sharing, subscribing. Leave any comments below that you've got. But until next time, I will speak to you soon. Bye. As always, thank you for listening to this podcast, and you could really help me and the podcast by giving a like, share, subscribe on all major platforms that you listen to podcasts on. As an independent podcaster, this will just help me exponentially when it comes to actually doing more things with this podcast. I truly do enjoy this, and I absolutely love revisiting these TV shows with you guys. So any engagement from you is always welcome, and I will try and listen to all of you when you give suggestions or just tell me what you think about the podcast. But once again, thank you for listening, and until next time, I will speak to you soon. Bye.